there is a 20-minute debate, TYT debate, on the vice presidential pick. I challenged Cenk Uygur to a debate, and he turned me down. Now, I don't know about you, chat, but, you know, I get pretty much more live viewers than TYT when they're live, so it's, you know, pretty insulting for them to ignore me to bring on other people, but it's okay. Let's go ahead and watch this incredibly dumbass fucking debate by a very, very foolish man.
Mike. I don't know who you are. I don't know where you are. What's your name? Want to start changing your ways.
Josh Shapiro is the governor of Pennsylvania. I just wrote an op-ed in Newsweek about why I think he should be the VP pick. It's not to say that there aren't any other people that are good. Tim Walz is a fantastic governor out of Minnesota. I'd be very happy with either one of those picks. But I like Shapiro because he's challenged corporations and corporate power before, and not a lot of people know about it, and that's part of what was driving me crazy, and I wanted to basically set the record straight. Jordan Ewell, one of our hosts here, is going to push back and disagree with me here after I lay out my case a little bit. So real quick, let me tell you things you might not know about Governor Shapiro, and then we'll discuss. So I wrote, Wall Street banks make an intense amount of money by running the pension funds in many different states. They view the state employees who run those funds as suckers and charge exorbitant fees for mediocre results. Shapiro put an end to that when he was the chairman of the Montgomery County Board of Commissioners. He also took on predatory lenders when he was Attorney General of Pennsylvania. Those lenders were the subsidiary of an enormous private equity company, Warburg Pincus. So look, I want to pause there to say, guys, Walz, who has also done this in his own way in Minnesota, and Shapiro, who did it in Pennsylvania, are unicorns.
Imagine being the guy who's like, oh, we got to drop out. We got to push Biden out because he's such a Zionist and he's supporting genocide. And then immediately going and trying to support the exact same guy, except 30 years younger.
This type of stuff never happens. It's there, obviously. This happens.
By the way, chat, I proved to you why this happened in Pennsylvania. Because Vanguard is hosted a 20-minute drive from Shapiro's home. He basically just gave pension funds to the people that are in his district, in his little county. He didn't stand up to corporate greed. He gave the money to the corporation that was from his area so they could donate more money to him. What the fuck are you talking about? Yes, I like Vanguard. I think Vanguard is a better investment for pension funds than actively managed accounts by grifters at Wall Street. I like the fact that they charge a lot lower fees to pension funds to manage their investments. But he was giving it to the home team. That's not somebody who's not corrupt. That's somebody just giving it to the home team. That's not to be praised.
0% of the time in the Republican Party, but almost never in the Democratic Party. So when I saw his record throughout all these years, and actually if you watch a lot of Young Turks clips throughout the years, you'll see me complimenting Josh Shapiro years ago, because I saw these things. So he's taken on an $82 billion private equity company and saying, I think you're predatory and you're ripping off the citizens of Pennsylvania.
So you give the pension funds to $1 trillion company in Vanguard. And what are you talking about?
I'm going to stand for. Usually what? Democrats never endanger their own corporate donors like that. Then you might not be.
He still gets. This is why I wanted to debate Cenk, because his entire thesis, I've defeated his entire thesis already. All right, chat. Let's look directly into this. Let's look directly into what Cenk is saying. Chair Shapiro called on Chief Financial Officer Dean Tortone to update the board on the performance of the retirement fund for 2015 and 2016. The value of the pension fund was $478 million, and it was basically the same a year later. Wow, what an incredible performance he achieved. The budgeted contribution for 2016 in the amount of $8 million had been paid in full to the retirement fund. So, yeah. So they invested $8 million and they were up $600,000. The ROI was 2.9%. Mr. Dortone indicated that Vanguard and SCI would give more detailed analysis of the fund's performance. So in other words, Shapiro invested in Vanguard fund. Wow. Vanguard is headquartered in historic Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. So in other words, A 26-minute drive, 14 miles away from Montgomery County to Valley Forge. Oh, so in other words, he took on Wall Street by investing in the local mega fund, where all the 20,000, well, how many employees work at Vanguard? The 20,000 employees at Vanguard, mostly living in his district, who would then donate big to his campaign. So the idea that Josh Shapiro was taking out Wall Street is just a laughable farce. What are you talking about?
Able to get money from Wall Street. He took on Wall Street twice, kicking them off the pensions when he was on the chairman of the Montgomery County Commission was amazing. Saved a lot of money for the good residents of Pennsylvania. Now, a lot of people have concerns about his record on Israel, so I want to address that, and then I'll bring Jordan in and we'll talk about the rest. I say his position on Israel is correct, though his optics are terrible. Like all sane people, Shapiro supports a two-state solution and a free, independent Palestine. As for his support of Israel, consider his remarks about its leader. He, quote, "I personally believe Benjamin Netanyahu is one of the worst leaders of all time," Shapiro said in January, months before Chuck Schumer came out against Netanyahu.
So what? There's a bunch of people in Israel who don't like Netanyahu. It doesn't mean he's anti-genocide. Like, what are you fucking talking about? Netanyahu is a bad look who loves Trump. Yeah, the Democratic politician doesn't like Netanyahu. But he praised Netanyahu when he made that insane speech against a two-state solution.
I couldn't agree more. And Shapiro was ahead of the curve in pointing this out. That was also about the same time Bernie Sanders was still calling for, quote, a humanitarian pause in Gaza instead of a ceasefire. It took 3 more months for Senator Sanders to call Netanyahu an awful, awful leader. When did Shapiro first call Netanyahu a, quote, a terrible leader? Back in November of last year, well before almost any other major politician.
That's not even true. A bunch of people were calling him a terrible leader because they were doing the fucking judicial coup. Biden saw Israel's dark future last week. It's undoing everything he's ever believed. He spent 50 years as the nation's champion. That's about to change. July 31st, 2023. Now that Israel faces what its top tier security think tank has described as the most severe crisis in the nation's history, its leaders, Benjamin Netanyahu, on doubt, are pointedly ignoring their indispensable allies' counsel and clearly mounting displeasure. The full-bore, unsoftened law represented a defeat for Biden, a telling reminder of the decline in influence Washington now exerts over the most hardline and fundamentalist government Israel has ever known. Like many supporters of Israel, I'm very concerned about Israel's democracy. It cannot continue down this road. I hope he walks away from it. So I guess he likes Biden now, because he did that back in early last year. Again, so is Cenk, either Cenk is stupid or he thinks you are. Because this is laughably fucking stupid.
So I've got more, but let me pause there. So Jordan, you tell me.
Shapiro doesn't support a ceasefire.
What's wrong with this argument?
I don't know if there's anything. Well, I guess there's a couple ways of looking at it, right? So you frame this as the progressive choice. You think Shapiro is the progressive choice. But even in your setup and in that piece, you made one fleeting mention of Walz. But in this setup here, you continually mention Walz. So I guess I'm wondering, I don't see this as much as like an argument. It's more like how do you make this case that this is the progressive choice when you can say both of these potential picks have done this, but this guy is the progressive choice. Why not Walz? When Walz has called for a ceasefire where Shapiro hasn't. Shapiro has conflated criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, something that you have pointed out on the show as damaging to the cause and unfair, and he's been called out by the ACLU for it. So how is this the progressive choice when issues that I've seen you rail against are pretty big red flags coming from Shapiro?
Yeah, so a couple of things here. This is not Shapiro versus Walz. And
why is it? Yes, it is. Yes, it fucking is. We have to pick one. So either she picks Walz or she picks Shapiro. And by the way, chat, this is really damaging because if you have TYT going, oh, Shapiro is the progressive choice, then Kamala Harris, those people supporting Shapiro could take this as an example and go, see, The progressives wouldn't be mad if you pick Shapiro, so you can pick Shapiro and we can lock up AIPAC. We can lock up the corporates. We can lock up all these. Betsy DeVos might slip us some money under the table. It doesn't matter he pissed off the unions. Look at these dumb progressives. They're fools. They're idiots. So he's actually he's providing aid and comfort for our political enemies here. Crazy.
And so remember, we're not even talking about our most ideal choice.
What? First of all, again, no one said anything about ideal choice. We know from the reporting that it's Walz or Shapiro. That is the reporting that we've seen, is it's Walz, Shapiro. Sometimes you throw in J.B. Pritzker. Sometimes you throw in Bashir. Sometimes you throw in, a couple other candidates. But those are the peripheral candidates. It seems pretty clear that people are lining up behind Shapiro or Walz. If you're trying to say Shapiro is progressive, you're insane. If you want to make this stupid video next, if she picks Shapiro and you make this stupid fucking video, that would make sense to me. At least you're trying to convince people to vote for Shapiro and Harris. So you're making some bullshit arguments that progressives would actually listen to as a way of covering up the fact that he's a fucking right-winger. Okay? Yeah, fine. If you want to do this after the decision is made as a way of trying to cope with the fact that she picked a right-winger, that's one thing. But to make this argument now, when we have someone who's clearly superior in every way, every measurable way, is insane.
Right? Bernie Sanders is off the board because we're never going to consider him.
He's older than Biden. You can't make Biden step down for age and then pick someone older than him. Come on. Of course it's not Bernie Sanders.
My first choice was Jamie Raskin, who's been terrific.
Jamie Raskin sucks. Fuck Jamie Raskin. He's also dying of cancer. What are you talking about? Yeah, guys. My top pick is dying of cancer. What the fuck are you talking about?
Terrific on a lot of fronts. Real progressive.
No, he
came
wasn't.
out, against what Israel was doing, called for a ceasefire a long time ago, et cetera, et cetera.
Jamie
right?
Raskin.
But we're down to the contenders now. So I'm not here to debate that Tim Walz is a bad guy or not. Absolutely not. Tim Walz is perfectly fine, perfectly good. And if you say, hey, I like him as a progressive a little bit more than Shapiro, I'm okay with that. I'm not. Look, I know that Tim Walz has also done some conservative things in Minnesota, but
okay, let's talk about the conservative things that Walz has done. One, there's a very progressive DA in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, that Walz has been, vocally opposed to a number of times. Big L, hate that. He sent in the National Guard to restore order during the George Floyd protests. Hate that. Don't like that. I mean, they did burn down a fucking police precinct. So every single person who is in elected office in America would have done the exact same thing there. Like, Bernie Sanders had been governor of Minnesota. He would have sent in the National Guard when they burned down a police precinct. If you don't know that, you're crazy. Does that mean that it's a good thing? No. I mean, was there some sort of leftist party that was trying to seize power? Was this a revolution? No, it was it was civil unrest. Every single politician in the history of the planet would send in the National Guard. Did the National Guard go in and mow down protesters? No, they didn't. So that's the argument you're going to make. By the way, Bashir sent in the National Guard. Against the Breonna Taylor protests and George Floyd protests. So that's literally everyone. So you want to mark them down for that and be less excited? Totally reasonable. But the only people that care are us. And what's the next one? What was the next thing? Oh yeah, he vetoed a bill to raise wages for Uber and Lyft drivers, but they ended up doing it. They ended up raising them anyway. They did it through a different mechanism. So, okay, those are the things. Those are the Walz negative hits on Walz those are the conservative hits that Walz has. You want me to compare that to Josh Shapiro? You fucking lunatic.
Governor, the list of accomplishments for this recent legislative session is impressive. Democrats codified abortion rights, paid family and medical leave, sick leave, transgender rights protections, driver's licenses for undocumented residents, restoration of voting rights for people when they're released from prison or jail, wider voting access, and adopted background checks for private gun transfers, and a red flag warning system to take guns from people deemed by a judge to be a threat to themselves or others. And that's just a few of the things done this session. The question is, how did you get that done?
Does any of the other people, let's take a look at these policies one by one. Codified abortion rights, background checks for private gun transfers, red flag warning system to take guns from people deemed by a judge to be a threat to themselves or others, transgender rights protections, banned conversion therapy, paid family medical leave and sick leave, legalized recreational marijuana, driver's licenses for undocumented residents, restoration of voting rights for former felons, expanded education funding, and $1 billion in affordable housing. Who else has done this? Again, of all the choices, who else? Well, Bashir made a speech right before he got owned. Or Josh Shapiro wants to legalize fucking Israeli genocide. Why is there even a question here? Tim Walz's transit resume is nuts. New popular Amtrak line, new BRT, that's bus rapid transit, 100% clean energy law, e-bike tax credits, best climate transportation law in the United States, erased deficits, unarmed fare enforcement. Get on the Walz train. So in other words, he's also got the best public transit. So exactly what the fuck are you talking about? Picking anybody else but Walz. That's crazy talk.
No, I'm not a perfectionist. That's exactly what I'm saying about Shapiro. He did some conservative things too. Now he's talking about a corporate tax cut in Pennsylvania. I hate that. Talks about school vouchers. I don't like that. That's not a progressive position. But Tim Walz has similar positions like that.
No, he doesn't.
But has passed a
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. This is just, oh, he has similar positions. Like what? What is comparable to school vouchers? Now, this is, I got to be honest with you, chat. This is where TYT, I lose a lot of respect for TYT because there's school vouchers. If you're not involved in politics, you might hear of school vouchers and go, oh, that's a bad position. That's not just a bad position. That is, if you're in local or state politics at the Democratic Party or on the left, you understand that teachers' unions are frequently one of the main fighters against the Republican right. If a Democratic politician is supporting school vouchers and spitting in the face of the teachers that thoroughly, they're a Republican. It's a disqualifying position. It's not just like, oh, they had a bad take on this issue, or, you know, they had this bad speech. No, this is treason. This is on the, this is a policy that's a non-starter for anybody who's even center left. It's like supporting Moms for Liberty. Exactly. It's a far right Betsy DeVos position.
Number of great bills that are very progressive on social and economic issues. Basically, what I'm doing here, Jordan, is two things. Number one, the reason I wrote this is because I only write.
If you're on the left, there's no comparison between Walz and Shapiro, other than to say, if you want to say all Democrats are evil and worthless and it doesn't matter who gets picked and I don't care about electoral politics, fine. If that's your position, that's your position. If your position, but if you do make distinctions, there's absolutely no comparison whatsoever. Shapiro's resume is significantly worse than Walz.
Op-eds when I feel like everybody's getting it wrong. So I wrote one for Newsweek about 10 months ago saying Joe Biden should drop out. He's obviously going to lose. And the reason I wrote that was because I was so frustrated that they couldn't see. Of course he's going to lose. Look at his approval numbers. Look at the underlying numbers. Look at his age, etc. And here Shapiro is being painted as some sort of conservative Democrat,
which he is.
And conservative
on Israel, conservative on labor, conservative on corporate tax cuts. In what way is he progressive? Please explain.
Democrats and corporate Democrats do not take on corporate power.
He didn't take on corporate power. He just changed investments. This entire thesis that TYT is making is based on the idea that Shapiro is taking on corporate power instead of just investing in the massive Wall Street firm that's headquartered 20 minutes from his house, like 10 miles from his house. Like, what do you like? His entire thesis is based on a false premise, which, you know, if I had been there to debate, which is why he didn't bring me in, because I know what I'm talking about, would have blown up his entire argument and would have humiliated him completely.
They never do that. And he's also done other terrific things. He took on the Catholic clergy, which was brave and saved a lot of kids.
This happened in like every other neighboring state. It happened in Maryland. It happened in Illinois. Like, what are you talking about? They took on the Catholic Church all over the place. What the fuck are you talking about? This is bog standard shit.
300 pedophile priests outed. He's increased the budget in Pennsylvania. The Republicans hate him for it. So, and he won't back down from it. So
you had to increase the budget because of fucking inflation. Like, that's just, the budget goes up every year. That's not even a talking point.
This is not a Walz versus Shapiro. This is, Shapiro is greatly misunderstood.
Not correct. Wrong.
And the idea that he is, you know, conservative or strictly corporatist or any of those things is not correct. And in terms of on Israel, look, no one's been tougher on Netanyahu.
Wrong.
He's terrible on the protests. I totally agree with you, Jordan.
He said that Arabs were violent and belligerent and couldn't live in peace.
And so, but among the contenders, Mark Kelly is way worse.
No, he's
right?
not.
And Mark Kelly was, the two top leading contenders were Josh Shapiro and Mark Kelly. No, don't dissuade them from Shapiro. Are you crazy? They're going to pick Mark Kelly. They're not going to pick Tim Walz. And then Mark Kelly's awful on Israel. He's awful on
Mark Kelly fell off. No one cares.
Everything else. And one more thing, if you guys don't know it, Josh Shapiro was one of the attorney generals that led the fight against the Muslim ban. So
that was literally every single Democrat. Again, bog standard corporatist shit. Corporatists hated the Muslim ban too because they want their cheap labor. It's not like, what?
Yeah, what he said about the protesters was stupid, and the executive order he did in Pennsylvania was stupid. I'm not one of these people who are like, oh, if I'm supporting someone, I'm going to tell you that it's all rainbows and you know, flowers and amazing things. No, he's done some bad things, but he's also done terrific things and has the courage to take on donors. That's what I like. That's what I'm looking for, and is a strategic guy.
So, you're saying it's not Shapiro versus Walz, but in a way it kind of is, because they're both being vetted. Of course, Kelly is being vetted as well. And Walz is clearly making the rounds in hopes of being selected. And there's energy behind him. And you and Anna have done many segments over the past several months, especially in the context of Biden losing support from people who are concerned about the war, Muslims, or people who have family or connections or ties to Gaza or Palestinians or that region in places like Michigan could be a huge vulnerability in the election. So with this, they're already articulating this is a concern for them. I guess you're saying this is the progressive pick, but also like this is something that they're already telling you. Progressives are telling you this is making us very uneasy. So how do you square those two? Because you say in this piece, he is the progressive pick. How do you make that case over someone like Walz, who has many of these same accomplishments and many more? You mentioned Shapiro is cutting taxes for corporations. Walz raised them. Walz also raised the capital gains tax. Walz, and an issue that you like to bring up constantly, you did it tonight, you always talk about it, paid family leave. Walz did that. He could then go on the trail and say, hey, I did that in my state. Let's do it nationally. Shapiro doesn't have that in his arsenal.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm sorry, I need to look it up here, but Walz has done a couple of things that are also, he cracked down on protesters during Black Lives Matter. There's a number of things he's done that's conservative, but I'm not arguing against Walz. It feels like this debate is about the versus A. Right?
No, this is baby shit. This is baby shit. This is baby shit. You've said that Shapiro is the progressive choice. Now, you get to pick one person. The debate is about who is better. You have to pick one. Kamala Harris has said, I've got these 6 people I'm considering. And the energy got behind Walz. Why is the energy getting behind Walz instead of JB Pritzker? Because Walz went on television and said, these Republicans are kind of weird. And it fucking went viral. And everybody started saying it. Kamala Harris said it, which means he had the moment when he went out in front of the nation. He found the perfect way to describe conservatives that was a critical hit. I've been talking about politics for decades, and every centrist Democrat has always been like, we need to be better on messaging. We need to be better on messaging. Walz comes out there and in his fucking audition hits a goddamn grand slam with "They're weird." And then, okay, that's great. So that gets a bunch of people excited for him. And then you turn the page and you say, okay, what has he done as governor? And you've got that long ass list of progressive accomplishments that he did with one vote, a one vote majority. He codified abortion rights. With the one vote majority, he protected the transgender kid. He banned conversion therapy, paid family medical leave, legalized marijuana. One vote majority. One vote majority, he did that. So, and then you compare it to Shapiro. What is Shapiro doing? He's pushing right-wing policy on Israel. He's pushing right-wing policy on vouchers. He's trying to cut corporate taxes. Policy after policy after policy. Shapiro bad. Walz has a record of accomplishment. And Minnesota is also a swing state. Is it as swingy as Pennsylvania? No, but it's a target for the Republicans. They want to go after Minnesota. And because Walz is from Minnesota, that gives him an advantage on Wisconsin. And if you add Minnesota and Wisconsin, that's more electoral votes than Pennsylvania. Now, obviously, if the Democrats are losing Minnesota, they're in deep trouble. But with Shapiro, that puts a risk on Michigan. Michigan probably had, and then the Gaza protests. And I can tell you, chat, I'm one of those people that if they pick Shapiro, I'm not supporting them. I am one of thousands and thousands and thousands of people for whom Gaza is a very important issue. And if picking Shapiro tells me that Kamala Harris doesn't take it seriously. She picks somebody who's radical on Israel. So that tells me she doesn't take it seriously. So I don't believe she's going to be any different than Joe Biden. If she picks Walz, who has been much better on talking about protesters, talking about the uncommitted movement, talking about a ceasefire, he's been way better on that than Shapiro has. So if she picks Walz, it tells me she's taking it seriously. So maybe she might actually change course on Biden. I'll listen to her. I'll consider her. She might win my vote back. But if she picks Shapiro, that closes the door on that. So he's trying to weasel his way out of his dumbass position, which is garbage. And his only way to support it is to try to attack Walz, who's better than Shapiro on every single issue. The best case that Shapiro can do is tie Walz. There isn't one issue that Shapiro is better than Walz on. That means he's not the progressive choice. You can say that Walz is bad about this, but then you look at that same issue for Shapiro, and Shapiro's worse. I'm telling you that Walz is not the progressive. He is a center-left social liberal. Is he a democratic socialist? Is he over here on the left? No. But he's somebody that doesn't hate the left so explicitly that he's constantly calling us KKK.
Is Shapiro the progressive pick or a progressive pick?
Neither.
And by the way, I didn't put the title on the piece. Newsweek did that.
No, that's in the copy.
Okay.
That's in the copy. You wrote that. You said it's got to stop. Shapiro is the progressive pick.
Okay. You know what? If you want to get into the versus a, I hear you, brother, and I'm not saying that dismissively. So if you and if you say, hey, Cenk, you should have said
lost the debate.
A progressive pick or a really good progressive pick, because that's being unfair to Tim Walz, I acknowledge it, okay? Because I got nothing but love for Tim Walz. And all the conservative stuff he's done, they all do conservative stuff from time to time. They always do stuff that drives us crazy. The fact that Walz and Shapiro have also done really progressive things is amazing.
Shapiro is not done anything progressive. Not one thing. He's just making shit up. He's making shit up. He's coping. But as I told you, getting your fucking hedge funds to invest in Vanguard, which is a 10-minute drive from your house, is not progressive, man. Those are the 20,000 employees of Vanguard who mostly live in Montgomery County and Chester County and Bucks County donating to you because they're locals is not progressive.
Amazing. Like, I almost never see it. So Jordan, okay, so that's the versus a discussion. But on the other hand, do you see what I'm saying? That this guy is getting smeared as non-progressive.
Because he's not.
And that's That's not fair.
That's
There's
completely fair.
so many things that he did that were progressive and
Like
took on
what?
donors that had an economically populist streak. And so, okay, on the protesters, he compared some of them to the KKK.
So he's going to justify that?
I hate that. That's so dumb. That's why I say his optics are bad. On the,
So why are you endorsing him if his optics are bad? That's what being a candidate is, optics.
The executive order, he said, anything scandalous or despicable or some ridiculous term like that could get you fired if you're a state employee. Don't do that. That's against the First Amendment. And you know that they're going to do that if they think that someone is being critical of Israel. On the other hand, Jordan, he's critical of Israel. I don't know any other politician that has been as harsh against Netanyahu as Josh Shapiro has. But that doesn't count. I mean, remember, October 7th, the next month in November, he's calling Netanyahu a terrible leader. I don't know.
What the fuck is this dumbass bullshit? It's like actually just garbage. Harris's shortlist for president has narrowed down to Josh Shapiro and Tim Walz. Shut the fuck up, Jake! You fucking idiot!
No, that any Democratic politician had that courage.
In November, I mean, the squad outside of them. But if you want to talk about mainstream Democrats, very few. Chuck Schumer eventually got around to that point. You've had a few mainstream Democrats criticize Netanyahu once it became safe. That was early, yeah. But I don't think it's fair to say he is like no one's been
He's not criticizing Israel. He's criticizing Netanyahu, which is part of the Zionist playbook to make Israel more appealing to Democrats by pretending that the problems in Israel are all based on Netanyahu, which they aren't. And then, Chuck Schumer criticized Netanyahu and then invited him to do a fucking speech and applauded him as he lied over and over again about beheaded babies and mass rapes and all sorts of other bullshit. So what the fuck are you talking about? Man, like legitimately, Cenk's argument here is so bad. I can't believe he's actually making it in good faith. I don't like to throw around the word bribe or taking money or anything lightly. But I do think that he was pressured by somebody who has influence over him to make this position. Legitimately, I think it's a corrupt position.
Offer on Netanyahu because he still takes the standard pro-Israel talking points. And he's conflated criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. So I just struggle to see the progressivism in some of this. And you've made the point, but let's talk about the other stuff too, because I think you bring up some other substantive issues. Let's talk about the donors. And there's one caveat with his challenging power argument. One of the biggest pitfalls outside of this for progressives, and especially for labor, is school vouchers. And while there's not a direct donation, the AP did a story a while back on how he handled Jeffrey Yass, who, for people unfamiliar, is a billionaire in Pennsylvania and has outsized influence in Pennsylvania politics because of how he can throw money around. Jeffrey Yass has wanted school vouchers in Pennsylvania for a very long time. He spends millions each cycle. He can help dictate the outcome of races. But when it came to Shapiro running for governor, he didn't get involved. He didn't spend any money. And in fact, over the course of Shapiro's career, he's taken $135,000 from Jeffrey Yass's affiliated organizations. And sure, compared to the $90 million he's brought in over the total of his career, it's not a huge number, but it still is some, and that leads some people to think he did it at Yass's behest to keep him on the sidelines in that gubernatorial race, because that's an issue that's key to Yass. And in the process, he upset the teachers' unions. We just talked last segment, or 2 segments ago, about Mark Kelly potentially being a VP pick and him just now signing on to the PRO Act. We got to keep unions happy. We want unions to be on our side, and they're expressing concern about a potential Shapiro pick. So it's not just that him versus Walz, in a comparison between those two, Walz is probably better. I just also don't see the progressivism outside of a couple other things, because you could make that case about a lot of Democrats. You could make that case about Kamala Harris and her time as AG. But then in the past week, you've also argued she's not a progressive and people should stop calling her a progressive. So I think for me, it's the label that you're assigning to Shapiro. Is he just a decent Democrat, or is he the progressive pick?
Yeah, okay, but Jordan, part of the reason why I wrote this and what's driving me crazy is people pretending that Shapiro is somehow worse than the other Democrats. Mark Kelly, like they're not even objecting to Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly gave standing ovation after standing ovation to Benjamin Netanyahu like a couple of days ago. And we're having a conversation about how bad Shapiro is when he helped defeat the Muslim ban.
Shapiro would have been in there doing a bigger standing ovation. He would have been on his knees in front of fucking Mark Kelly to do even bigger standing ovations. He would have been standing on a fucking phone book to have an even bigger standing ovation.
And he called Netanyahu one of the worst leaders in the world, and like a million months ago, and Mark Kelly sitting there kissing Netanyahu's
ass too.
His ass, and we're now saying Shapiro's worse? That doesn't make any sense at all. So no, I'm not going to agree to things that don't make sense. Kamala Harris, look, one of the things I'm worried about, Jordan, is that progressives are under some delusion that Shapiro's a bad guy, and maybe because of those spectacular instances of him using the KKK language, etc., right? But that Kamala Harris is going to change our policy on Israel. She ain't going to change our policy on Israel, okay? I mean, so why are we going after Shapiro as if he's worse than Mark Kelly, Kamala Harris, etc., when he's actually shown an ability to criticize and to go after the Israeli government more than they have? So, I mean, you're not saying that Kamala Harris and Mark Kelly and Andy Bashir are better on Israel than Josh Shapiro.
No, I'm saying they're the same because, as you've pointed out,
no, I would say they're not the same, though, Jordan. Shapiro has criticized Netanyahu significantly, whereas Mark Kelly's kissing his ass and giving him standing ovations.
This is delusional.
Hasn't barely said anything about Netanyahu or Israel.
Shapiro has in that situation, Shapiro has the benefit of not being in Congress and not even having a possibility of attending that speech. So we don't know what he would do. You might think he wouldn't stand up, he wouldn't applaud. I think it's fair. He's probably better than Mark Kelly, but I think I don't see much difference from where Kamala Harris is, other than that one line calling him a terrible leader, which also Chuck Schumer did. But it's just because he did it earlier doesn't mean there's any substance beyond the rhetoric. He hasn't called for a ceasefire. Tim Walz explicitly called for a ceasefire and not just a temporary pause like most Democrats did. When they had the primary in his state, in Minnesota, and they had an uncommitted movement, he celebrated the vote uncommitted movement, celebrated their engagement, said, hey, they're calling for something. They want change. They want to see change. And then said, I want a ceasefire and I want a lasting ceasefire, not just a 1 week or temporary pause. Josh Shapiro has not done that. So just by saying Netanyahu is bad is a very, very low bar to set. And when, again, the framing that you establish in this piece is he is the progressive pick.
Yeah, look, it's not a low bar when in January, everybody's like scared to death of criticizing Netanyahu. Even Bernie hasn't called for a ceasefire yet. And he says, quote, I personally believe Benjamin Netanyahu is one of the worst leaders of all time. So, but no credit for that. No, same as Mark Kelly.
Sure, he can have credit for it, but but then what? He hasn't called for anything beyond that. He's just saying he's bad. Okay, good job. But then what? How do we fix it? He hasn't called for a solution. He hasn't called for a ceasefire. And let's keep it real, Jordan. Let's keep it real.
Do you think that it's more likely for someone like Josh Shapiro to fix Israel because he would have the credibility to be able to actually challenge Israel, or a random non-Jewish candidate who's going to come in and go, oh no, I'm going to defy AIPAC and every donor there is, and I'm going to make a stand on this, and I'm going to get called anti-Semitic, and I'm going to do all those things? No, we know Bernie Sanders is more credible when he criticizes Israel. Yeah, they even call him anti-Semitic. I get it, right? But he is more credible. And so Governor Shapiro would be a lot more credible and is more credible when he says Netanyahu is one of the worst leaders of all time. So he's much more likely to take action if they go in that direction.
But in your piece, you argue that it's probably not possible and it's not his fault because he's not in charge. Kamala Harris would be. So I don't know what's the benefit of having him on the ticket then, just because he's Jewish.
No, I'm not saying put him on the ticket just because he's Jewish. I never play identity politics like that. I just don't want people playing identity politics in the reverse direction. Don't tell me that Mark Kelly is better than Shapiro. That's just saying I don't know politics. He's worse on Israel and he's worse on every other issue. So look, Jordan, you sensing what I'm saying. I'm worried. Why are people saying that Shapiro's worse than Kelly when that's
this is why I think Shapiro is worse than Kelly. Here's why. Here's his interview with Jewish Insider. The result, Shapiro argued, should be more education on anti-Semitism and on hate. But even more than that, he said students should learn how to read news critically and how to make sense of the morass of information they encounter on social media. Given the fact that so many people, especially younger people, are getting information, getting their news through social media, we need to make sure they are careful consumers of that information, he said. Some Democratic activists within the Muslim community have threatened to stay home in 2024 rather than supporting Biden, giving his support for Israel. Shapiro, who has already appeared on the campaign trail for Biden, largely brushed those concerns aside. He expects them to come around in the end. I think when push comes to shove and folks have a choice between Joe Biden and chaos of Donald Trump, I don't think we want to go back to that chaos, he said. I would hope that, notwithstanding this momentary difference, that when people have to make a judgment next year about the direction of this country, they don't want to go back to the chaos that Donald Trump brought. On Thursday, Shapiro will celebrate the first night of Hanukkah at Penn, where he will participate in a public menorah lighting. He plans to meet with Jewish students to make sure they know that we see them, we're here for them, and we want them to feel safe, because many of them do not feel safe on campus right now. I think any university's president's really top responsibility is to make sure students feel safe and secure on campus. Well, he's not meeting with the Palestinian or Arab students. Absolute nonsense.
It's just not true. I think people are taking a shortcut here. And it's a dangerous and bad shortcut, and I don't want them to take that. And show me Mark Kelly or Andy Bashir or any of them that took on giant Wall Street firms on behalf of the average American. I'll give you time.
I mean, we can go through Walz's resume. You won't want to bring him in. You don't want to make it about them.
But you're going back to the versus I got no problem with Walz. Walz is a lovely guy.
Well, you keep bringing up Mark Kelly. You want to compare him to Mark Kelly, but you don't want to compare him to Walz. So, like, what's the framing here?
Okay, then let's see if we can get agreement on something. So we know who the contenders
are. Mark Kelly
are.
is not a contender. Mark Kelly has largely fallen off because of union support and the fact that it would be bad for the Democrats to pick him and take him out of a Senate seat that would then be open for a special election in 2026. Picking Mark Kelly is marginal. Arizona isn't really that important of a state, all things considered. The Democrats don't need to win Arizona to win. So, picking Mark Kelly he's not even that good on TV. Like, no, Mark Kelly sucks. And he's bad on Israel too. He brings all the badness of Josh Shapiro to Israel, but actually, so there's no reason to pick Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly's out. It's Walz or Shapiro. And you're saying who's the progressive choice for VP? That's the debate. Who's the progressive choice for VP? Why don't you want to talk about Walz as the progressive choice then? As the more progressive choice.
We're not going to get Raskin or Nina Turner or any of those folks, right? So among the contenders, if you say Shapiro's number 2 to Walz, I say, God bless your heart, brother. I got no problem with that, okay? So are you saying there's
Shapiro's not even second?
Someone who would be better than Shapiro in taking on corporate power, being a progressive, among the contenders left other than Walz?
Other than Walz, I think it'd probably be similar with Bashir. I don't know, like, who would be 2, who would be 3. But I think people who are saying Kelly is somehow better than Shapiro shouldn't be taken seriously. That's just pure hyperbole. I also don't see that a lot. Maybe you've seen it more than I have. I don't think there's a huge amount of fanfare for Mark Kelly in general, maybe outside of Arizona or like hardline centrist establishment people. But again, this is about the progressive pick. This is a framing that you established in this piece. And on that point, I think if we want to compare, even if you want to throw Bashir in there, I don't know if he's necessarily progressive, but even among those
not at all progressive.
Okay, so let's take him out. So then for the progressive pick, I think the case could be made that Walz is a better progressive pick.
All right, so it sounds like we're agreeing that Shapiro is in the top 2.
No, J.B. Pritzker is better. Next.
Wow.
No. No. J.B. Pritzker.
Like we're supposed to hate the guy because he's in the top 2 of progressive contenders?
I never hated him.
Okay.
Early on, I said he was probably a guy they should look at.
Yeah, and look, Jordan.
A couple of weeks ago.
That's why this is funny, because we're arguing over, Walz and Shapiro, who we both kind of like, right? But the point of the piece isn't Shapiro is better than Walz. The point of the piece is Shapiro is far, far more progressive than people realize. He's got economic populist credentials, credibility. He's actually done it. He's taken on donors. He's taken on Wall Street. He's taken on the Muslim ban. He's taken on Netanyahu. And I don't want people to forget that in this fervor that's cooked up as if he's the most conservative. He is definitely not anywhere near the most conservative of the contenders. And even you acknowledge, I think, that he's in the top two.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of cases to be made for him to be the top two. But again, you said he's the progressive pick.
Here we go.
That's but you wrote it. I didn't write it for you.
Okay, all right. Look, I acknowledge the versus a all the way back, I don't know, 20 minutes ago. So I hear you, brother. Jordan, thank you for doing it. I appreciate it, man.
Of course, anytime.
Yep. All right, guys.
Oh, my Lord. I will say that. Wow, that was embarrassing.
She has no idea who Mike is.
Mike. I don't know who you are. I don't know where you are. But you may want to start changing your ways. Change new ways. Or changing your name.